hear the snow is falling on our car as we drive for miles to that little town called home. Tinsel hangs from every corner of the house, and Christmas lights shine bright through the cold evening fog. And I hear sleigh bells bouncing off the halls as the church choir sings along. I feel my heart melt when you walk through those doors for Christmas. You're all I want. All I wanted was you. Christmas cheer and drinks with friends we haven't seen for a while, since I've been to that little town called home. Pine tree dressed up with every ornament we got, and stockings hung with overflowing from the top. And I hear sleigh bells bouncing off the halls as the church choir sings along. Feel my heart melt when you walk through those doors for Christmas. You're all I want. All I wanted was you. 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 And I hear sleigh bells. All I wanted was you. Feel my heart melt. All I wanted was you.
There is a place where you can run free. Time does not exist. Take a chance when the world before us falls under our face. I can't hold on. I can't remain so strong. We have the same old bond, but everything is wrong. My love is gone, but I've been born. I can't make it on my own.
stay for someone that wasn't worth the wait. Counting down the days. I know when I'm moving onward, I just wanna trust in your word, but we're running out of time. We were doing alright, holding on, but I'm losing the fight. Could we run away? I know if we just hit ground, running, closing off all the world with the light coming in, bending before we break. Don't you know you and me, we can run away. You and me, we can run away. Run away, run away. So gonna check. You and me, we can run away. You and me, we can run away.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this interesting discussion today. Elections, rigging of elections in Africa. And we're asking the question, will it ever end? Really happy to have all of you join us tonight to have this very important discussion about elections in Africa. I'm just going to introduce our panelists today, the speakers that we have who will help us shed some light in tonight's topic. Of course, we have Tundu Lissu all the way from Tanzania. He's the presidential candidate who ran in 2020 and also the vice chair of Chama cha Demokrasia, that's Chadema, and also a lawyer. As well, we have Maura Isaac, who is with us. Happy to see you as well, Maura. He is a persons living with disability advocate and a nominated senator in Kenya's Senate representing persons with disabilities. Of course, also we have Charles Kanjama. I'm not seeing him with us yet, but I know he will be joining us a little later, if not in a few minutes, and he is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. We also have Joseph Kalimbwe, not seeing him yet, but hopefully he will be joining us in a few minutes. He's an information and public secretary for Zambia's ruling party, UPND. And not forgetting, we have Nana Mwafrika as well. I'm not seeing her yet, but I do believe she will be with us. She is a human rights activist in Uganda and who is also a lady who has attempted to run for an elective seat in Uganda's parliament. Also, we have Dismas Mukua, who is a political analyst all the way in Kenya, and of course also Joseph Simeha, who is also with us. Both of you gentlemen, I have seen you there. Dismas Mukua, Joseph Simeha, both of them are political analysts, very vocal on political matters in Kenya and of course beyond Kenya. Thank you again for joining in. Again, the topic today, what a topic really. Election rigging in Africa. It is not news to us. This is something that has been talked about for a long time. I'll just begin with you, Lissu. You did run for a presidential seat in 2020, and your opponent, of course, at that time, the late President John Magufuli, was not really kind to you. There were allegations of rigging. Would you mind telling us, Lissu, what your experience was like? Have you seen this, what we're talking about today in terms of rigging in your country? Could you give us an idea of an experience in your country?
Thank you very much, Leah, for having me. Do you hear me, as I suppose?
Yes, I do hear you.
Okay, very good. So thank you very much for having me. And good evening, everyone on the panel and all of you who are tuning in. My name is Tundu Lissu, and as Leah says, I was a presidential candidate in the 2020 general elections in Tanzania. but beyond 2020, I have been fighting these electoral battles since my basically since for nearly 30 years. The first time I contested an election in Tanzania was during the first multi-party election in 1995. The only time I did not participate in Tanzanian elections was during the general elections 2000 when I was abroad. But other than that, I have been an active participant in Tanzanian elections since 1995 as a candidate, as well as the advocate representing my party members in numerous election petitions arising from those elections. I can say I have pretty much been involved in every major election petition in Tanzania since 2000. And therefore, I think I know a thing or two about elections in Tanzania, and I certainly know a thing or two about election rigging in the country. So that's just for introduction. To answer your question about the 2020 general elections in which I stood as a presidential candidate, in all the years, in all the previous general elections that I took part in, I can say we in 2020, we had a general election like no other in our entire history. The level of institutional rigging, the level of state violence, the level of level of partiality of the electoral machinery, that is the National Electoral Commission, was just unprecedented in our history. So 2020, if you ask me, was the peak of the worst. It was pretty much the worst general election we had in Tanzania. We have had in Tanzania since pretty much the reintroduction of multi-party politics in the early 90s.
Much, Lisu. I mean, if you just this,
Leah, I think your connection is not very good. So maybe you should repeat the question again because it's not very clear what your question is, or you want me to pick it up?
You can go ahead.
Yeah, I think now your line is actually working. So you can go ahead to ask your next question while we also try to get other speakers online.
All right. I'll just go on, move over to Isaac Mora, who is with us as well. Isaac, you have a lot of experience when it comes to politics. What has been your experience like in Kenya when it comes to elections and just being able to witness allegations of rigging in your country?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much, Leah Ngari, and I'm very happy to be in the same panel with my brother, Tundu Antipas Lissu, who is my friend. And all of us who are on board. I think what I want to say is that yeah, rigging starts very early. I remember when I started to vie properly, I was in campus, and on first year I ran for office as one of the 7 executive members, and I won with a landslide. But then the next time I tried to run to be the president of the students, there was rigging. People photocopied ballots, and I lost. Yet I was a clear favorite. But then now in the mainstream of politics, I ran for parliamentary seat in 2017. Wow, massive, widespread rigging. I mean, I appeared before the ballot, thinking very well that I'm going to win fair and square. But later on, when I came to know people were doing multiple rigging, in fact, one of my supporters confessed to me that she had voted 8 times. This is in the party primaries. And in party primaries, Leah, if you come from a stronghold political party, you have even a 40 to 50% chance. Like if you win that seat, you're almost, one side inside parliament. And then, of course, recently I also ran for, for the parliamentary seat again. And it was the same thing, people stuffing ballots, marking papers, causing violence, by, participating,
Isaac, are you there?
Those kind of behaviors were coming during this time, and it's critical again. When you win this seat, you are good to go. And so party.
Hello, Isaac. We seem to be losing you.
Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you, but we seem to be losing you here and there. All right, let's just give time to Isaac as he possibly just sorts out the connection issue there, but we'll definitely come back to Isaac to tell us more about that. I know we have Nana Mwafrika also from Uganda, and Nana also, you ran for a seat in Uganda, and well, sadly you did not manage to clinch that seat. Tell us about that experience, Nana. What really happened?
Leah and everyone else on this space speaking Africa and elections. I'm very, very pleased to join you here tonight. First of all, Leah, I haven't run for political office. I'm a human rights activist in civil and political rights. I have never run for political office, but my very close friend, Stella Nyanzi, Dr. Stella Nyanzi did. So maybe you mix us up there. Yes, today happens to be the Africa Day, a day where individual Africans should be able to be, celebrating the steps we have taken as a continent, celebrating the achievements of the individual African. Here we are speaking election rigging, and will it ever stop? Rigging of elections in Africa, will it ever stop? Can the will of the people be ever respected via electioneering in Africa? There are mixed reactions when you pose such an issue on elections. In the context of my country, Uganda, where we also just had our general election 2021, I would say that most of the common man and woman have sort of given up. If you leave these streets where maybe the elites are and you go to places, the equivalent of Gikomba in Kenya, the equivalent of Owino Market, Katwe Market in Kampala, Uganda, Rukunjiri, Gulu, we have Omoro, where we have a by-election impending in a few days. And you speak to the locals, you speak to the actual African man, the East African, about elections, you'll be weakened at what response you get. People in the context of Uganda, elections have meant nothing for the past close to 4 decades now. The election seems to just be a cost on the local person, only benefiting those who participate to take political office. There is a very, very big gap in voter education. There is a lot of violence when it comes to the actual participation in my country. I'll speak in the context of my country, Uganda, where you have it on paper that we are a multi-party system, and therefore people can participate as they wish. But when it comes to election time, campaign time, you have the police and the army openly working for the incumbent, working for the running government, which is the NRM now. You have police deterring and preventing other participants, like, other candidates in the race by beating them, live fire ammunition. We lost people last year in November, where the young man, Bobby Wine, had been running and he got arrested violently, and people tried to react to it, and several people were gunned down in broad daylight. So when you speak rigging, how can it stop if the education around it, people don't seem to understand why you call for elections, yet there is no willingness to let the citizenry freely participate. We have challenges like incumbents, or call them dictators of Africa, because yes, we have countries that have taken steps. Yes, my friends from Kenya, where I'm a visitor for the past 1 week, you have taken steps, and I congratulate you on that. I have been in Nairobi, I have been in some parts, and I haven't seen nobody tear gas the other. I haven't seen beatings upon different participants, but that's what happens in countries like mine, Uganda. There are other countries that have taken positive steps where we see that the citizenry are allowed to participate. The various candidates can convene their people and speak to them. But in the context of my own country, last year, 2021, a lot of reasons were found to prevent participants from fairly and freely involving themselves in their right to be part of the electioneering. They used the COVID pandemic as a total weapon against the opposition. People were beat up, people were killed, people were jailed, and as we up to now, many political activists are still in jail. If I should throw in this really quickly, we are not even in elections anymore. We have a small by-election up north of Uganda, but as I read the news about home today, the former leader of the former strongman opposition, Dr. Kizza Besigye, has had several, close to 2 weeks now of real hardships, coming out to try and enlighten the people on certain matters, and he's barred from leaving his home, arrested and taken to jail. As I learned this evening, he was granted bail by a court in Kampala, Buganda Road Court, at 30 million Uganda shillings bail, cash bail, for having stood up to call on the people to say something, to do something about the very current challenge of inflation and very high costs of common essential goods. Let me break it for now and have the mic taken to someone else.
Thank you, Nana. Thank you for your comments. I want to throw it over to Dismas and just hear from you, Dismas. Would you say that there are particular conditions, perhaps in Africa, that usually, favor any type of rigging at any particular election?
Well, maybe thanks for the opportunity, and please allow me to start with the Kenyan context, because the reason why, or rather my definition of having a free, fair, and credible election, and when there is no, is when the will of the voter is reflected in the ballot box. Voter has got capacity to take a decision devoid of external variables. Like the situation of Kenya is, you have ethnic nationalism. There are majority of people will vote because they have been held hostage by their tribal leaders. If you look at the political in Kenya, for some reason there's a certain pattern. If you look at Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance, there's a pattern that majority of the party leaders come from specific ethnic groups. When you look at Kenya Kwanza, the same thing. So there's a very high chance that even if a voter wanted to really exercise his or a democratic right and you come from a particular region, you are under pressure to behave in a particular manner. Like, for instance, and Honorable Isaac Moura is here, he would probably confirm, there's a very high probability that out of 10 voters, say in Uasin Gishu today, 8 will vote for UDA. If you go to Bondo, out of 10 voters, 8 are likely to vote for ODM. And they do it out of their ethnic nationalism, not really because they want to do it, but they feel that they're compelled as a community. And then there's the element of the ethnic majoritarianism that in Kenya, if you want to become, say, a president, you must be a member of a big ethnic community. And it was reflected the last few days when Mount Kenya, that is about 35% of the registered voters in Kenya, told all these coalitions that whatever you do, the running mate of necessity has to come from Mount Kenya. So if you're a voter, say from Mandera or someplace, then there's a very high chance that you'll join these alliances and you'll vote for those people, not really because you so desire, but because the key variables have conspired and that's the only thing you can do. So in my view, the biggest challenge we have in Africa, in as much as we have regular elections, in Kenya we have an election every 5 years, but people vote under duress. Like, for instance, right now in Kenya, there's a lot of toxic politics. There's fake news, there's alternative facts, there's a deceit, and there's a lot of lies in the political space. So the average voter is not able to differentiate, to establish whether it is actually solid news, is it fake news, is it alternative facts, and then also there's the aspect of the pain and pleasure principle in the electoral system. That people are made to vote in a particular manner because of fear instilled. For instance, in Kenya, for a long time, we've had the fear of Raila Odinga in parts of Mount Kenya. That when people go to cast their ballots, they vote for particular candidates, not necessarily because they like them, but because they fear Raila Odinga. They've been told that Raila Odinga is probably a nationalist. He'll come and take your assets. And then the elephant in the room that majority of people don't want to discuss is the benefits of an incumbent. When an African president is an incumbent and is defending his seat, he almost always has certain specific advantages over the competition. Like now, the situation obtaining in Kenya between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, the entire government system, a number of cabinet ministers, rather cabinet secretaries, have been told to campaign for Azimio la Umoja. In fact, majority of them have created political parties which are mere special purpose vehicle. So they're using such resources to campaign for one candidate, and the same benefits obviously does not accrue to the other candidate. So in my view, the biggest challenge we have is that in as much as most countries have got very solid constitutions, there is regard for the rule of law and order, but there is no penalty, pecuniary or criminal penalty, for the people who run elections. That if there is an error of omission or commission, there is nobody behind bars. Like, for instance, in Kenya, after the last presidential election, the Supreme Court said that the presidential election was marred by illegalities and irregularities. 5 years later, nobody has taken responsibility for those illegalities and irregularities. Nobody has been found guilty. You have these court petitions, but folks, for some reason, nobody's taken behind bars. The Kenyan constitution is very clear that cabinet secretaries are not supposed to participate in elections. They did participate in the last elections. They're participating right now, but there's going to be no penalty. It's business as usual. So, in my view, people do not take liability. If there's nobody behind bars for electoral offenses, then rigging is going to be our best practice. And as I see it, rigging does not just happen on the election day, as Honorable Mora has indicated, that maybe during the party primaries there would be stuffing of boxes. But rigging starts very early in the day, giving the Kenyan context. How easy is it to get an ID that can be registered as a voter if you come from a particular area? How easy is it to be a registered voter? And then we know that all these schemes on voter suppression, sometimes there's violence in a place maybe where a certain politician doesn't want a high voter turnout. So there are all these many variables that have to be cleaned up. And finally, when you look at the party in Kenya, again, I'll commend Honorable Isaac Mwaura. He attempted to come up with a very good piece of legislation, which didn't see the light of day. But the Political Parties Act in Kenya gives our political party leaders the yam and knife. And this is what I mean. They've got a blank check. They actually determine who is going to run for a particular seat. You're supposed to have a universal suffrage, but at this time round, nobody paid attention to that. So the party leaders would have, while having a cup of coffee, would determine who is going to be in their lineup. Now, for the ordinary voter, you are given you're already given a candidate by your party leader, and you are told that if this is ODM, this is UDA, this is the various political parties, you are told this is your candidate. So you did not have the opportunity to participate in the party primaries. Never mind that political parties in Kenya are funded by the taxpayer. And in my view, party primaries are made to fail because they happen on a working day. So people are all over town looking for their bread. So there are so many issues, and I think it's going to take a while before we can. But I admit that situation obtaining in Africa is the same situation obtaining even in the US, because even during the last elections, there was toxic politics, fake news, alternative facts, lies, and deceit. You may remember the Cambridge Analytica, even for Brexit, there was people were influenced to take decisions out of fear, out of pleasure, but the decisions do not reflect their selfish interest.
Thank you, Dismas. I'll just throw it over to Isaac, because I know, Isaac, we kind of lost you as we began. I just want you to pick up on that comment that you were making, and of course, just a reaction from what Dismas is saying.
Yeah, I think, yes, in terms of party primaries, this is a very important aspect of democracy. And they are wrought with a lot of corruption and rigging and a lot of things that are under the table. Actually, it is very shambolic, these party primaries. Maybe for those who may not understand what I mean, is that when you have an election, for example, say in Kenya we have elections in August, political parties have got to nominate people to be their candidates. So aspirants have to contest within the political party. Now, political parties do not have enough capacity to conduct those elections in a free and a fair manner. If you look at, and this is a complaint that I have heard by members of parliament, even senators in Rwanda, in Malawi, in South Africa, for you to get the ticket is extremely difficult because there's this politics of patronage. And in other jurisdictions like in the UK, political parties do not do universal suffrage where people go to vote. What they do is that the party has got a delegate system, and then the delegates vote based on the party loyalty and membership. But then our political parties, for example, in Kenya, keep on changing. Every 5 years is a new political party. So in terms of having party loyalty, party discipline, it doesn't really work well. Now, as a member of parliament who has actually faced that, I have served for 10 years. This is my 10th year in Kenyan parliament. I have been a victim of these political machinations, and I have sponsored a party primaries bill that seeks to bring party nominations within the ambit of the law, so that then it is an offense, for example, to stuff ballots, to cause violence, to rig elections. That is still not the case. Because then it's not something that is looked into, and that is where good leaders layer actually lose the opportunity to serve. And it doesn't matter how educated you are. It doesn't matter how one may shout integrity, as long as you rig yourself in. Political corruption is the mother of all corruption. And what I have experienced, Leah, in this country is that when you go to political party nominations, as we call them, It's like going to a mutura joint. This is like eating tripe. I don't know what you call it in English. But then these pieces of meat, the innings of a goat or a cow that we like to eat by the roadside. I mean, many people in Africa will connect with that. It's like going there with a fork and knife, while others are using their bare knuckles to eat. And political hygiene at that point in time is as foreign as a fly in a teacup. So you can't really have this put in place. Political party leaders determine who becomes the leader. Money exchanges hands, for example, and so therefore it's a very opaque process. And yet these are the people then who are presented by a political party to become candidates in the elections. And then if then there's a rot during the party primaries, then it goes ahead to manifest even in the main general elections. And even in terms of the way, like right now, even there are people who are saying, oh, presiding officers, clerks are being compromised ahead of the elections so that they can predetermine who wins the election. So all of this kind of things, when you have voter registration suppression, in this case where you have people newly registered voters, and I have been a victim in 2002, you go and you find your name is not there when you want to vote because certain people of a certain orientation, of a certain tribe are supposed to vote. It becomes extremely difficult to have proper leaders in democracy. In fact, I have been a victim, Leah, of being dismissed as being too westernized, of being too formal, because you have to be a crook. You have to have some kind of a conmanship. In fact, one of my colleagues in parliament was bemoaning the fact that in politics, as he was putting it, you have to be a perennial liar, you have to be a thief, you have just to be a conman so that you survive the people. And it is really survival of the jungle. In fact, I mean, after having not succeeded, in these party primaries, I have been bemoaning the idea that can I continue to be in politics, for example, because then if I have to rig myself in, and that is the only way, then that it becomes difficult. But then, of course, they are good sides because sometimes there are people who go unchallenged, they get a direct nomination, and there is a new phenomenon that is now. I beg your
Isaac,
pardon.
are you there?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I got lost a little bit. They are using opinion polls. They are also using party interviews. You get there and you sit in for an interview. That is a novelty. It is subject to abuse, but if it can be enhanced, it would really help, because very few political parties there have capacity to call a national general elections for the various seats, and there is also state interference if you're seen not to be supporting the state also, and a lot of money exchanges hands. The other thing that I also want to talk about that is really outright rigging is that there is no capping of the amount of money that is used in political campaigns. Election campaign financing is a bill that we've had.
Yeah, could it be that we've got a problem, or I just cannot hear what is going on?
Oh, Joseph, you can't hear. Can you hear me?
Hello?
There's silence in here. No, I can hear, but there's silence in here. So I thought perhaps my phone has got a problem.
It's okay. We can hear you, Joseph. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, but then when I came in, there was silence. So I thought perhaps maybe my phone has got a problem, or maybe it's a network or something.
Sorry about that. I think it's probably a network issue.
Yes, we're having Isaac Maura speak right now, Joseph. So we'll let you know when you're next. Thank you. Isaac, please continue.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I want to just finish this point by saying that we need to do a lot of capping so that when I was a student in England, sometimes back, I remember there was a minimum requirement that if you are running for office as a student leader, you'd only spend about £100 in that, a maximum. And you could see it. You could see some people could be, maybe they used a little bit more, but then you could also say they were a bit more creative. But here, people literally are buying positions. It is a direct, you can actually say a direct covariance between election, campaign financing and who wants. For example, let me give you my scenario in 2017. We were three main candidates running for the parliamentary seat in Ruiru. I spent about $300,000 US. The then incumbent spent about 500,000. The one who won spent about $800,000. Now, this is a constituency that then had about 160,000 voters. It translated to about 1,000 shillings, Kenya shillings, about $10 per voter. And this is money that really, really, if you look at it in the strictest of sense, it goes into like voter bribery and cajoling and what have you. So we still have a long way to go. I mean, I have just come from an election. I spent about $200,000 or thereabout in party primaries, and that is not counting all of those things that we did because here in Africa, you know the role of a leader. You have to be generous, and the issue of reciprocity, the big man syndrome. You have to provide. You have to go to all of the weddings, birthday parties, pay school fees, repair roads, and what have you. You are the leader in development. That in itself gives some kind of undue advantages for those who are moneyed. And so people who have good ideas and who can just stand on the podium and argue their case out do not really see right of this. So we have to look at both. Number one, the issue of having laws that govern primaries so that then it does not escalate to the main election. Number two is the issue of financing. And then, of course, finally, number three is really the issue of the election. How do we appoint election commissions? Are they independent of the state? I am very, very, very encouraged by what happened in Zambia with Hakainde Hichilema. In fact, I wrote a very good article about him in Kenyan newspapers. That he won after trying 6 times, but then he won against an incumbent. I'm very impressed by what happened in Malawi. When an incumbent was defeated and an election had to be called. Of course, even in Kenya, an election was nullified. So that is the hope for Africa, that even when rigging has happened, or it has been perceived to have happened, we have our judiciary that is becoming more robust. We are now debating in Kenya, if, for example, you have been impeached in the past, would you run for office again? And the High Court has ruled, and there is now a bench that is going to be constituted by the Chief Justice that would determine whether when you're impeached, you should run for office again. And if they say that you cannot run again for office, that would really help in terms of moving us forward, so that then we do not have people who are corrupt also corrupting the political process and therefore occupying a political office.
Sorry, Isaac, I meant Isaac. Isaac, you've mentioned something to do with political corruption. And what I'd like to hear from you, Joseph, as an analyst. Joseph Kalimwe, thank you for joining us. Sorry about the little challenge you had there with the network. Joseph, you are working with the UPND, which is the ruling party in Zambia. Of course, it was really unexpected for the UPND opposition party, to sail through and become the ruling party because of the, the past and the kinds of experiences that the UPND has had in the past, But I'd like to hear from you, Joseph. What would you say really supported a win for UPND in your country?
Can you hear me? Leah, can you confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Joseph. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Basically, what we did is that the masses of our people were very pivotal in the election of our party, the United Party for National Development. So what we did is that we knew that if we needed to win the election, we needed to win with big numbers. And we went out to mobilize the masses of our people, wherever they were, whether it was in the villages or in the cities, or in the suburbs where the affluent live, or whether it was in the townships and the compounds, as we call it in Zambia. So we mobilized the masses of our people in their numbers, because previously, if you followed the Zambian politics, we lost the election in 2006 with the same presidential candidate, President Hakainde Hichilema. In 2008, we lost the election again with the same presidential candidate, President Hakainde Hichilema. 2011, we had the same outcome. 2016, we had the same outcome. Although we believed in 2016 that we had won the election, but then due to certain things, the Electoral Commission of Zambia decided to announce another winner. That was Edgar Lungu. So we knew that from those experiences, from those lessons, we needed to win with a bigger number if we were to be announced as winners by the Electoral Commission of Zambia. So we went out to mobilize the masses of our people, particularly in those areas where we had previously gotten lower votes. So we went to a place called the Copperbelt province. We went to Northern Province to mobilize the masses of our people. Everywhere where they were, we knew that if we needed to win the election, we were going to win it the old-fashioned way. And so we mobilized, we spoke to them about the issues that they were facing, the issues of the economy, the issues, the political violence that was going on, the issues of the former ruling party being involved in corruption. And so we went out line by line, page by page, to ensure that the masses of our people get the message of the opposition then. And then after that, we mobilized for a voter registration because we knew that we needed the masses of our people to register in their numbers for them to go and vote. So we had a very robust voter registration process, and we went out to capture the interests of the young people in particular, young people between the ages of 18 and 35. And so we told them the issue that they were facing, that they were not graduating into a Zambian economy that could offer them jobs, that the country that raised them, that gave them birth, was not giving them the opportunities that they needed to succeed. And so we spoke to the very core issues that they were facing. And after that, we saw about 4.1 million young Zambians between the ages of 18 and 35 going to register and vote. And during the period of the voting, we also ensure that those young people were also there on the line to vote. So they went out. We held spaces even like this. We were on social media, mobilizing the masses of our people. Because if you understand, there was COVID-19 and then the campaigns were banned. It also happens across the African continent. We also see the numbers of people mobilizing in Kenya between Raila Odinga and William Ruto. But it's the same issues that we were facing. And so we went out, engaging the masses of our people, even when the people were demonizing us to say we're a social media political party, that our President Hakainde Hichilema was a Facebook president. We knew that those were, it was just ways of demonizing us. And so politically, we are very sure and we are very concise to say we need to mobilize the masses of our people. We go where they are, particularly the young people. If they are on social media spaces like this, we are there talking to them. If they're in the townships, in the compounds, as we call it in Zambia, we are there, door to door, mobilizing, talking about the issues that they face, letting them understand why they needed to go and vote. And so it became very difficult then for the Electoral Commission of Zambia to ensure that after the voting has been done, they announce another person. Because had they announced another winner, had President Lungu been announced as a winner of the election, there would have been bloodshed in the country because our people were very tired of the corruption that was going on. Our people were very clear and concise from the start to say we needed a new president that could take our country forward. And our party had provided that presidential candidate in President Hakainde Hichilema. He spoke to the interests of the masses of our people.
Mentioned, Joseph, if you can hear me, you've mentioned that you went through a couple of experiences. And I know one of the things that we have seen over time, and as you've mentioned, that UPND tried to field a candidate, but with failing experiences. I know there were massive restrictions on the party, especially when it came to campaigns. How was UPND able to overcome this?
Well, we were being banned from campaigning in some areas, particularly the Copper Belt. There's a place called the Copper Belt, as I mentioned, in Zambia. It's a very strong political province in our country. When you got support there, there's a very high likelihood that you could become president of the republic. And so your party can win. So we were being stopped from going to campaign there. And even just using the Zambian airspace, our presidential candidate, President Hakainde Hichilema, was being stopped to say he cannot fly out of Lusaka onto the Copper Belt because President Lungu was maybe at that stage also having a campaign rally there. So they are blocking us left, right, and center. You go and campaign this side, they block you. No, this you are the opposition. You are not supposed to be here because Edgar Lungu is also in the same area. So you are not permitted to campaign here. So there was a huge amount of blockades that were put in place to ensure that we don't campaign and meet the masses of our people. And because of COVID, they said that there will not be rallies and all that. So what we did is that because they stopped the issues of rallies, we are doing drive-throughs. Our presidential candidate, President Hakainde Hichilema, would drive through with his vehicle and the motorcade, and the masses of our people could just see, and then we would go to social media to tell them about our manifesto, because we knew that we needed to be very honest and frank about the political space space that we're occupying, to say our people must not just vote for us because we are in the opposition or because they are tired of the former ruling party. They needed to vote for us because we are providing better alternatives, that we got better plans to solving the economy. We've got better plans to ensuring that the social political landscape of Zambia changes. And so we are going through the manifesto. How are we going to ensure that the agricultural sector of Zambia improves? How are we going to ensure that we don't just become heavily dependent on copper, which is our main raw material? And so we're telling our people that, our manifesto, to let them understand that we're very serious about changing the landscape of our country, economically, politically, and socially. So even when they were stopping us from campaigning, we were going to social media, coming to social media spaces like this and Facebook. We would have about 40,000 people viewing the president speaking. Even on Twitter, would come here to have social media spaces to engage the masses of our people. And we knew that even when they were telling us that we were just social media politicians, what they couldn't understand, and that is the political space that they failed to understand, was that social media is like a chain. Those young people that were there and that were hearing the spaces that we're occupying, that were hearing the voices that we were putting across, they were going to tell their parents that do not know how Twitter spaces work. They were going to tell their parents and their grandparents and even people in the villages what they heard from conversations on Facebook. And so even when we were being blocked, we were very clear that we could also use social media to win that election. And we won it very clear, and it was very resounding, and it was very embarrassing for the former ruling party. And we are happy that we could take our country back.
Thank you, Joseph. Quite an interesting conversation there we're having, just on rigging and hearing what the UPND in your country, the opposition party, was able to do, overcoming the restrictions and, just targeting that youth vote. Maria, the conversation is growing even more interesting as we continue discussing today's topic. And again, I just want to mention that this conversation is open to everyone else who's joining us today, other than our speakers. If you have an experience you'd like to share with us about, as far as your country is concerned, voting, rigging during elections, just feel free to give us your comments. So Maria, I'll just leave it to you now to take over.
Thank you very much, Leah. And I am acutely aware that Simeha has not spoken yet. Before I will have redirecting. Just 1 minute.
But you need to
let me mute. Joseph, can you mute your mic? Sorry, Joseph. Yeah, Simeha. I think that one of the most important part of this conversation has been around sort of saying that in the region, Kenya is taken as a model country, that, many politicians and even some of the observers believe that actually it is more of a role country or a role model country. Do you agree with that observation? And if so, what do you think sets us apart, Kenya apart, and what would set us apart as Africa if we would allow or follow the footsteps of Kenya? Thank you. Simeha, are you there? You're muted, so you need to unmute your mic.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Good to be here. Good to see friends and colleagues here like Tundu and Maura. Straight to your question, and then I just make some comments to place my thoughts in context. If countries around us or in Africa look at Kenya as a model country or a role model, then we are doomed. Then we are looking at extremely pathetic, a very pathetic situation, because in terms of management of elections, we have had opportunities in this country to do much, much better. But what we have experienced, especially from about 2007, I will not go into the history of before 2002, when we had a one-party dictatorship. And then we had a brilliant window in 2002 when we had actually the freest ever election in this country. And after that, from there on going forward, every other election has been a pathetic situation of rigging. So if we are seen as a role model, it's just pains how bad the situation is on the continent. Now, in terms of the context that I'm talking about, let me just place this in context and mention that election rigging happens in many, many places, including in Europe, including in the USA,
including in the United Kingdom, in America, and so on. Of course, we are discussing Africa, but I'm just saying this to demonstrate the fact that it's not unique to this continent. But of course, primarily we have to concern ourselves to our continent and to our countries. So if I look at election rigging and some of the things that have been said, the oldest being ballot stuffing, interference with the electoral system, interference with the results transmission systems, tallying systems, use of money and other forms of bribery, and so on. Voter suppression. This one is extremely important. It's happening a lot in African countries. It's big time in the US, where you don't have to wait for the election itself, but at the point when people are registering as voters, you ensure that those population groups that you do not want to participate in elections because you know that they most likely will not support your agenda, you do everything, including using the law, incidentally, to ensure that you make it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for them to get onto the voter registers roll or to register as voters. And then there's the violence, extreme violence. In fact, I think in many states it has moved from violence to extreme brutality. And the biggest culprit, there are many people who, and parties that you can blame for election rigging, but the biggest culprits in my experience, in my observation, is the states, those who are in charge of the state. So this would include incumbents where, say, they are campaigning either to get another term or to have their party continue in office or to have someone in whom they favor to succeed them. And they do this, this coercive, brutal, violent governments, administrations in Africa, and the use of security personnel to influence elections. It's extremely important, and it's at the core of understanding election rigging, because there is something beyond politics they are trying to protect. They are trying to protect a position of privilege. It's not just the politicking that we see. It's not just the politics and campaigns and the 5-year or 4-year ritual or 6-year ritual of voting and so on that we see. There is something that they are fighting to protect, and they are prepared to go to the extent of killing and mass murder to protect this. And this is positions of privilege with regards to economy and public finance. You have a small group of people at the top of the food chain, if I may use that term, who either they may initially have acquired that position through popular mandate, but in most cases, they never got into that position through popular mandate. So you have an unholy alliance of public administrators, national executives, politicians and business persons and security personnel. So you have these people in a small group of elites who are dominating. I like to call it a pact of domination, a pact of economic domination. They dominate everyone else in the country. They use the political system to put on a facade of legitimacy. They use elections to put on a facade of legitimacy so that they continue with this pact of dominance over other people, while they continue to enjoy the privileges at the top, and they extract from everyone else. This is normally, in my observation, the biggest motivation for election rigging. And since you can't suppress people, participation in elections, steal people's victories and so on for forever, they have to use extraordinary means to keep people down. In fact, it is deliberate. I'm just again picking this from the lady from Uganda, who spoke and said that she's from Uganda, but I think currently she's in Nairobi. This violence, this extreme brutality, it's very deliberate to discourage people, to make people lose faith, to make people lose confidence in elections, so that you can actually completely give up and just let it be a game of those who use it to retain their positions of privilege at the top of the economic food chain. They use this to ensure that they turn, and especially using the tool, national budget as a tool, they turn they turn private debt into public debt. They turn public resources into private resources. They use this to benefit themselves as individuals, as families, in connection with transnational capital. And they rule the time when, for example, what our colleague from Zambia has just been describing happens, they rule the time when someone else other than in their circle will win an election and remove them from that position of privilege, from that perch at the top. That is why Tundu Lissu, for example, went through, in my humble opinion, the extreme brutality and attempted assassination that he went through, because they cannot countenance, they cannot imagine someone else winning an election and toppling them from that position of privilege. They do not know that, they're not sure that they can negotiate with this person and bring them into that small circle so that they can continue dominating others. And if you're someone who has been vocal on defense of human rights, rule of law, good governance, and so on, like many people in this space, you frighten them even more. So they will use every means to ensure that it's now no longer about just winning or losing. They don't just want you to lose. They want to ensure that you are so afraid, and the people who support you are so afraid of elections that they completely lose confidence, that they begin to say what we were told happens in Uganda, that elections are no longer important, they don't matter, they don't add value. So let them just do what we want. They don't change our lives. Let them just do what we want, and we go on with our lives. When that begins to happen in a population, they have achieved the ultimate. That is the ultimate goal of election rigging. It is to kill the people's spirit in democracy. It is to kill the people's confidence and trust in an electoral process, so that the people just give up and let that small elite that is dominating the people through an economic and political pact continue doing whatever they want. That's what I can say, sort of as my initial remarks.
Thank you very much, Simeha. And I think that's a very, very important point you just made about the positions of privilege. With that, I would also like now to go back to Tundu Lissu. And I think that one of the biggest disadvantages, and I keep saying that we have in Tanzania, is that because we primarily speak in Swahili, many people around the world, but even within Africa, are not able to follow the minutiae or the details of such important events like an election. And usually, as you always say, there is more to it than what is being read in the international media. So I recall that you have repeatedly emphasized that the election of 2020 in Tanzania was not rigged, but it was stolen. The entire election was stolen. And listening to some of your colleagues and some of the analysts we've had in the space speak about that, what would you say that made the 2020 Tanzania election a case study for the rest of Africa? Something that I think even others can learn from, or others are learning from.
Thank you very much. I think we have always had rigged elections in Tanzania, and I say this as a participant in all previous multi-party elections since 1995, except, as I said, since the 2000 election. All those elections were rigged. They were not free or fair, but at least there was competition. There was some semblance of competition. There was a possibility that if you fought hard enough, you could beat them even at their own game. You could beat them even if they tried to rig, because there was a semblance of competition. And that is why we have, if you look at electoral tallies since 1995, up to at least 2015, the opposition had always done better. You can see that the trajectory for the opposition had been rising. The playing field was not level at all, but the system allowed competition. After 2015, when President Magufuli came to office, he declared war on multi-party democracy. Let me put it that way. And he did this on national television, and Tanzanians would remember the president telling the nation on television on 6th of February 2016, on CCM's 40th anniversary, the 39th anniversary, I think, that he would see to it that by 2020, there is no opposition party in the country. And the rest is history, as they say. Now, what was the difference between 2020 and all these previous elections, which, as I say, had always been rigged? In 2020, they started by making sure that voter registration was not conducted in accordance with the law. The law requires during the election cycle, you have at least 2 times in which the National Electoral Commission and the Zanzibar Electoral Commission would normally register voters. This was not done seriously. I think in the election cycle 2015 to 2020, there was only voter registration was only done once, and those of you who are in Tanzania know what really happened. The Electoral Commission was in a hurry. The exercise lasted hardly 2 weeks everywhere they went, and they had not registered people when they had not registered people for 5 years. Now, come the election time, 2020, one of the biggest weapons that was used starting in 2019, actually, during the local elections, the village and Mtaa elections in the country, where 96% of all opposition candidates across the country were disqualified. 96% of candidates disqualified. As a result, as you know, today we have 100% village leaders, Mtaa leaders in Tanzania who have not been voted for by anybody, by anyone, because the opposition candidates were simply shut out of the election through disqualification. Now, 2019 was dress rehearsal for 2020. 2020 was the big one. So in 2020, the lessons of 2019 were then applied to 2020. And what are the statistics? Today, in Tanzanian parliament, you have 28 members of parliament, 11% of the total constituency MPs in the country who were not voted for by any person. They passed unopposed. And they passed unopposed simply because opposition candidates were disqualified in their respective constituencies. This is the highest rate of parliamentary disqualifications in our entire history. Just to give you a perspective, in 2015, during the general elections 2015, only one opposition candidate was disqualified, parliamentary candidate. This time, 28 candidates were disqualified. And the people who were elected unopposed are the who is who of the Magufuli cabinet during the first 5 years. So the prime minister, the speaker, the foreign minister, senior cabinet ministers passed unopposed because their opponents were simply shut out of the competition. We had the highest rate of disqualifications of parliamentary candidates. When you go to the local government seats, the Diwani positions, The figure actually is 22% of all ward leaders, ward councillors who were elected and opposed. The figure is 872 councillors out of 3,956, if I'm not mistaken. 22% of local councillors in Tanzania were passed and opposed for simple reason that their opponents were disqualified. Not a single CCM candidate was disqualified. All these who were disqualified were opposition candidates. Now, we went into the campaigns, as you all know, and in 2020, the campaign was like no other. I have, in all elections in Tanzania, I have never seen the level of violence that was used against parliamentary candidates and presidential candidates, me and my running mate. We were tear gassed by the police, in my case, on 3 different occasions, prevented from campaigning in the south of Tanzania, simply because the Civil Aviation Authority wouldn't allow me to use the helicopter. We had a helicopter, and we had to apply for a flying permit, for flying or landing permit every single day in which we use the chopper. And of course, in the case of southern Tanzania, where Magufuli did not dare to go because he had robbed people of their cashew crop in 2018, 2019, in order to make sure that we don't use Magufuli's failure to go to our advantage, I was prevented from campaigning in Lindi and Mtwara regions. There was extensive voter intimidation. As I say, the use of force by the security, the use of force or violence by the security forces was more extensive, not just in Zanzibar, which has been the case since 1995, but also in the mainland. We had people being killed in areas of the northwest in Tarime, in the southwest in Tunduma, and other areas. And many people were put in prison until after the elections. On election day, ballot stuffing. But prior to ballot stuffing, the polling agents, we have always had a problem with the opposition polling agents getting access to the polling stations. Now, that peaked in 2020 general elections. There were 80,000 polling stations across the country. Now, on the morning of election day, that just on the early morning, when the polls opened, polling agents in 164 constituencies, opposition polling agents, totaling about, if I remember correctly, some 57,900 polling agents for Chadema alone were prevented from accessing polling agents in 164 electoral constituencies. Completely denied entry. Others, about 12,000 of them, 12,000, some hundreds of them, were allowed after considerable delays in getting into the polling stations. So others went into polling stations after midday, others an hour or two before the close of the poll. So in total, over 70,000 polling agents out of a total of 80,000 something like 72,000 polling agents of Chadema alone were either prevented completely from entering polling stations, or they were delayed into getting into the polling stations, or they were not allowed to stay until the end. And therefore, as a result, then CCM and its candidates and the police and all these election officers, the presiding officers in polling stations, had a field day staffing ballot boxes. So you have strange results in which constituencies in Mara region have exactly the same number of voters who actually voted. They have the same number of spoiled votes. They have exactly the same numbers of rejected votes which went to the opposition. It is just, we have never seen an election like this. These are what make the 2020 general election an election like no other. We have never seen anything of this sort in our entire history. Now, the one final point that I would like to add in this regard: how was this made possible? We have always had an electoral system which was totally controlled by the president, who has always been the CCM chairman, or in this case, chairwoman. So you have the electoral machinery, which is, because it is dominated by the ruling by the president. It is the president who elects the electoral commission as a whole. He elects the director of elections. Magufuli, previous presidents did not do that. But in the case of Magufuli, he appointed all returning officers of all constituencies in the country. I say previously, Kikwete did not appoint the returning officers. These were the district executive directors are appointees of the Civil Service Commission. But when Magufuli came to office, the first thing he did was to personally appoint these district and municipal executive directors who serve as returning officers during elections. Now, what is more, in the list of the executive directors who were appointed by President Magufuli, we counted, and this is back in 2018, I think. We counted out of nearly 200 local government authorities. We counted about 82 district and municipal executive directors who were CCM candidates in the 2015 elections. They either lost in the primaries, in the CCM primaries, or they lost to the opposition during the general election. 82 out of 200 of people who supervised the 2020 elections were CCM members who had participated in the previous general election as unsuccessful candidates. Others, the remaining 118 of them, also Magufuli appointees. And you remember President Magufuli saying on national television that he did not expect to have a municipal or district executive director declaring an opposition candidate a winner in a future elections, having appointed them as district executive directors, paid them handsome salaries, and given them these expensive vehicles that they move around with. So President Magufuli had declared openly, he had directed them openly, don't declare an opposition candidate winner. And that was the crown in that obnoxious jewel that was the 2020 general election. So we had a situation where a party like Chadema, which in spite of the disqualifications of our candidates, we had fielded very strong candidates. We had campaigned very long and very hard. We were given only one candidate out of 264 constituencies. Unheard of for a party which is the largest opposition party in the country, and by some accounts, it is even better organized than CCM, in spite of the latter's advantages in terms of state resources and so on. We were much better organized in 2020 than we were in 2015. But because of these theft of the election process, we were given, basically they chose to give us one constituency MP. I think not more than, I don't think we even had 10 Diwanis, and they ended up also choosing our people, supposedly ours, who are now sitting in the National Assembly pretending to be special seats MPs. So,
thank you,
to conclude, 2020 was an election like no other in that sense. That entire process was stolen. In all previous elections, there were problems of rigging, of institutional interference with the free and fair electoral process, but there was competition. In 2020, competition itself was precluded.
Thank you, Tundu Lissu, for those comments. It sounds like, based on what you're saying, sounds like in Tanzania, there's an already set system to ensure that certain people remain in power. But I'll come back to that point. I want to give Wanda a chance to just make a comment about tonight's discussion. Wanda, if you can hear me, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much. At least I've had a chance to hear to my seniors in regards to African elections. I was so happy listening to Simeha plus others that Africa has never had, and if we have ever had free, fair elections, then they are very countable. And the main problem that we normally face, it is in regards with our economies. That as Simeha was putting it, our people, the kind of economy that we inherited from the colonialists, and the kind of politics, the kind of leadership that we inherited, those that took power, they got into positions knowing that for us to remain powerful, for us to remain rich, then we're supposed to control the economic part of our politics. Therefore, any other time our politicians get into power, so I'm sorry that even this has gone to an extent of affecting even those in the opposition, that they'll always either use quite a lot of money to campaign. Like I was listening to my senior and leader Isaac talk of how they've been campaigning. Then probably he mentioned a budget of around $3,000, of which this one now equates to probably 30 million Kenyan shillings. Of which you look at this, then you try and quote what Mwalimu Nyerere once said, that you look at a politician, and this politician is using quite a lot of money to get into power, to get into State House or White House, then chances are so high, this is a corrupt leader. Therefore, looking into the entire system, the leadership, it is a corrupt system. We tend to vote in leaders that are corrupt in nature. And therefore, we tend to end up blaming or pointing a finger at our electoral, the electoral bodies, but our electoral bodies don't have a problem. The leaders that we tend to elect, they're the ones that have a problem. Then when they get into power, they quite make a lot of mess and mistakes. They quite punish their opponents to the extent that they are afraid to allow their opponents get into position. Like when I look into what happened in Zambia, we had President Lungu. President Lungu is defeated, but is not ready to accept the defeat at first. But when President Jakaya gets in, probably has roundtable discussions with Lungu, then he realizes that Hakainde is not going to revenge. From that point, Lungu now accepts the defeat. Then the transition comes in. Therefore, rigging elections in Africa, it is something that we are not going to see it end unless we start having leaders that get into position to serve but not enrich themselves. But it is a problem that you are facing. We go back to Tanzania, our neighbors from Nairobi, Kenya. Then you have a case of those that we are calling COVID-19 MPs. Then you look at the COVID-19 MPs, chances are so high. They spend a lot in the elections. And then now they were like, how do we gain back? How do we get our money back? And therefore, in this case, it was easy to either use a corrupt system, either get into parliament in illegal ways. But in this case, they feel like we spent quite a lot in the process, and now we are going home empty-handed. We are going home for 5 years before we are back into the system. And therefore, entirely, both those in leadership, in the government, and the opposition, we need to start looking direct into the mirror. Then we realize that the much we are spending in this process, in itself, we are making it a corrupt system. Number two, we need to change tactics. Like I like the way at times Raila Odinga plays his politics. There are times when you want to beat your opponent, you need to change the tactics. Because one, your opponent is afraid of you. Your opponent being afraid of you, unless you change the tactic and make them realize that, yes, you're afraid of me, but your fear is not justified. I'm not an enemy, but I'm in to provide a solution. Then we'll always have around, we'll keep going round and round. And therefore, I wish the opposition gets to a point and use either ways that they can to make those in power realize that they are not enemies, but they are in to offer solution. They are in not to enrich themselves, but they are in to serve the citizens and serve the masses. And therefore, as I end my submission, election rigging in Africa is there. It is not going to end unless the opposition plays its card and convince those in power that we are not coming in to punish you, but instead we are coming in to offer solution and serve our citizens. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I see Anyu is here with us. I've seen you've raised your hand. You can go ahead, Anyu.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, if I had to contribute to this topic, I think elections in Africa, rigging is something that we'll have to live with a very long time, as long as the status quo remains the same. Because, for example, I'm a Kenyan, and these countries, they are operating under different circumstances. If I were to talk about Kenya, for example, like in Kenya, the reason why elections are rigged is because they want to maintain the status quo. And we are ethnic-based. We do ethnic-based politics, whereby there are big tribes and small tribes. And these big tribes play it in such a way, they use the tribe against the others. So you get like 3 or 4 tribes that are very good in numbers. So they will always use divide and rule method. They set one tribe against other and combine with the other, and therefore they say, if we get tribe A and tribe B, we need to set tribe B against tribe D so that they don't get to meet, and then we can do what? We can get the numbers. So that is why our politics, our elections will always remain rigged unless all of us, we do away in Kenya, especially I'm talking about Kenya. In Kenya, we have to deal with the ethnicity. Our ethnicity is the problem. We are so tribal to an extent that corruption comes as a result of tribal nation. So we are no longer doing it. Our politics is not gender-based. It's not agenda-based. It is tribe A plus tribe B to get number A and give us power. Now, once they are in power, they also remain. They want to maintain the status quo whereby people with good ideology will never get to. And then they retort around the big names. So unless you are from a big family, it's very difficult for you to rise to the top.
Thank you.
That is why, for me, let me just end in 1 minute. That is why I think for us, it will take us time as long as we are still tribal. The moment we stop tribalism, election will be just okay. But as long as we're tribal, it will take us a long way to achieve it.
Thank you for those wonderful comments, Anyo. I see Nana, you're back. Would you mind telling us some of the forms of rigging that you have witnessed in country Uganda? Nana, are you there? Hello, Nana.
Yes, Leah, thank you. Luckily, I'm back. Yes, for election rigging to ever stop, first of all, there has got to be a heightened and improved addressing of gaps in the international law. There's got to be increase in use of proper use of the international law. Where democracy arises when people desire for dignity, equality, justice, liberty, and participation, and desire for a voice. But in a community like mine, in a country like Uganda, some of the ways used, you have the head of state who shows clearly he has no intention to let go of power. They turn off, for example, they disconnect the internet. For close to 2 years now, or maybe more, Facebook is still closed in Uganda. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? So there has been a total stripping of dignity from the people. The people's voice means absolutely nothing. The heightened and unchecked violent suppression of voices, suppression of the people's need to voice their concerns is a really big threat to Uganda and the region of East Africa and Africa as a whole. Dictators arrange elections to just merely legitimize their continued forceful stay in power. In a country like mine, in Uganda, when we ask a question, will election rigging ever stop? It's unlikely that it can stop. The incumbent, the ruling party, its head arranges the elections. He chooses who heads the electoral body. He appoints everybody that does that. He goes ahead to use the security forces, from the very, very, very simple one of them. What would be the national police is clearly a partisan police, especially during elections and after. So election rigging might never stop, might be stopping it might be a big challenge if the international law does not cover its gaps, if human rights, the basic human rights continue to be violated, as we see in some countries, especially in East Africa here, we can never speak of elections that will mean anything to the common people. The elections will just continue to be a culture, just a show, just something to run after 5 years to legitimize these dictatorships, to strengthen them. They arrange these elections, plan, they already know the plan, how to go about it, suppress people, beat them, threaten them, turn off the internet. Things have gone digital. The last election we had in Uganda, that was during COVID, they themselves, the head of state went, oh, we shall have scientific campaigns and blah, blah, blah. He called physical campaigns himself and then beat up every other opponent that went to speak to the people physically. Then they shut down on, we have a law in Uganda now, the Uganda Communications Commission. You are not even allowed to make a Facebook Live. Facebook is still blocked. It's still illegal to use Facebook, even though they use it too. The ministers use it, MPs use it, politicians use it, but officially Facebook in Uganda is closed. Imagine in this digital era, the young have all the tools that they would use to resist all the impunity. They have all these tools being used against them. The advancement of technology in Uganda is just used against the people. The common taxpayer pays taxes to just have impunitous actions meted on us every day. And the dictatorial, authoritarian regime just allows no freedom of speech, allows no free and fair participation by anybody apart from those on the side of the ruling government. So with near impunity, everything is done. The suppression, it's sending many Ugandans into exile now. And unless the African Union, bigger international bodies come in to save the situation on some of the things being done in these African countries, elections might never mean anything at all.
Thank you very much, Nana. That was very, very useful. So I would also like to add Kipngeno's comments in this conversation. Can you maybe give your quick remarks about what you think in terms of election rigging in Africa and whether you think this will ever end?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to make some remarks regarding this very important topic, especially at this moment where we are going into an election. And I've participated in a number of elections as a consultant, and you quickly realize that election rigging sometimes is part of the game. And if you look at at that level of stealing votes, it is no longer rampant in a number of democracies in Africa, save for some few countries. But there is another level of election rigging that is really common in most African jurisdictions and states. One of emerging rigging ways is voter intimidation, vote buying, and that is common in places like Uganda and some other places where you don't have a strong democracy. But in places like Kenya, which is now emerging, has to do with disinformation and propaganda. It is really big, where a number of candidates, a number of parties. They're actually working in a way that you have to confuse the population. You have to make sure that people don't have access to right information so that they can make independent choices. And this is very big. And most of us might not actually be saying it, but it is being played by the media. It is being played by different political actors, and it is always very misleading. And you will witness in this election, and I promise you that it is not something that is about to go away. A speaker before me really mentioned that in Africa, sometimes people or politicians do not want to really accept the results of a democratic process, because they also feel if these people are to win election, what will happen to our safety? What will happen to our properties? What will happen to our wealth? And that's a very big problem. And fear is what is fueling all these things. And the speaker also indicated about ethnic mobilization or actually or targeting people of particular tribes in order to win. And as much as it is seen in a negative way, but even if you look in mature democracies in US, they have to actually look into all these demographics, including whether in US are you an Hispanic, are you a Black American, are you an Indian American, something like that. So ethnic mobilization is a tool that most politicians use actually in trying to win this election. So it becomes really a problem when these people win. It is now their time to enjoy power and use that power to allocate resources, employ their own people. And that is what has become a problem, other than really working on the manifesto to make sure that everyone is actually getting their rightful share. And that is becoming a very big problem in Africa. I doubt that rigging is something that we will get out of in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Maria.
Yes, no, I just wanted to thank him very much. And I wanted to remind everyone that this discussion is also a bit about optimism. So I would like any one of the speakers to pick up this challenge. What is the one or two essential things that can be done in order to end, or at least to minimize or to stem out election rigging in Africa? And I'm putting out the challenge for anyone who's ready to take this on. Dismas, I see your phone is on. Okay, Dismas
May
is...
I pick up that?
Yes,
Yeah.
and then Simeha. Okay, Dismas, go ahead.
Well, some of the African countries have got very strong judiciaries, and especially the Kenyan judiciary has become very strong, and they're stamping the authority right from the first ever presidential election. And even as we speak today, a number of persons wanted to run for office but have been impeached have actually been stopped from presenting their papers to the electoral body till they're cleared. So in my view, I think the judiciaries in Africa need to be very strong, and we've got a fairly independent way of appointing judges. Most of them enjoy their decisional independence as well as institutional independence. But a few observations about Uganda, which I found to be interesting, is that here you have one gentleman controlling the military and one gentleman controlling the political space through the NRA, which is now UPDF, and then the NRM, which is the political movement. So when you have one man controlling those systems, it becomes a bit of a challenge. Now, if you go down the road in Tanzania, it's very interesting, exciting, annoying, and depressing that as a presidential candidate, there's no room for you to challenge the election. So even if you find people stealing your votes, you can't go to the judiciary to seek any sort of help or guidance or a resolution, which is a nightmare. But in my view, what we must do is, as Africans, is to run away from the Stockholm syndrome, that we have fallen in love with our captors. There's some sort of trauma bonding that we have created with the people who keep on beating us every day. A few days ago, we saw in Uganda the so-called first son, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, was celebrating his 47th birthday, and it was treated like a national event. People were being interviewed. They were saying, we cannot wait for this young to become the next president of the Republic of Uganda, which I found to be very worrying. So, in my view, what we must learn to do is run away from this Stockholm syndrome, stop falling in love with the people who are giving us trauma. And then earlier on, I'd spoken about ethnic nationalism, and one of the speakers has indicated that there's some positivities to it. But what I meant to communicate is that if you have gone to office simply because of ethnic majoritarianism, that it's only the numbers from your people from your tribe who have given you power, then you have no interest to be aligned with the national and public interest. Because in any event, even if you don't serve the entire nation, if you go back to the polls, people from your village are still going to elect you. So you have no interest at all in serving the entire nation. And I think partially Kenya has sorted that one out by saying that you cannot become a president unless you've got 50% plus one, and majority of those counties. But in my view, what we must do is to encourage many more of these spaces so that the ordinary voter realizes that they've got power, and even if you are a dictator, your time will come to an end. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Simeha?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just three quick comments, and also in response to what the challenge you've put to us. The first comment being that, in my humble opinion, the tribe is innocent, or the ethnic group is innocent. It is true, first of all, let me acknowledge that identity politics are everywhere, and the easiest tool to use is the easiest identity to use is the tribe or the ethnic group. Although in many other places religion has been used, even demographics like young people, women, and so on are used. So identity politics are live and they're everywhere, but it's not the masses, it's not the group, because there's no homogeneity in terms of a group grabbing power and benefiting from that power. It is mostly manipulation of the identity that then you get people from one ethnic group cheering, certain, very corrupt dictators from that ethnic group, because they've been threatened, they've been coerced, they've been manipulated, they've been brainwashed, and so on, to believe that those dictators being in power is to the benefit of that group. And most of the time, it's false. We know it from our own country that we've had presidents from one ethnic group for a very long time, but some of the poorest people, some of the people who have suffered the most, some of the people who lost their lands to Wazungu during colonialism and never got back, excuse me, those lands because the elite from their own communities took them, are the communities that have produced presidents. So it is not always true that the tribe is to blame. Yes, I accept that many people in the tribe tend to be coerced, to be brainwashed, and so on, to cheer in the imagination that they are benefiting and to taunt the other ethnic communities. But it's a fallacy. It's not a group that benefits. It's a small group of individuals, of elites, who benefit. Then the other thing, which I'll connect with what I propose should happen, is the deliberate corrupting of our political systems. It is done so deliberately to ensure that the political system is as corrupt as possible, and that is what provides an opportunity to manipulate it, to rig elections, to steal an entire election, and so on. Because if you have a clean and efficient political system, issue-based, it's not going to be easy. So how do we solve this? In my opinion, laws or legislation, constitutions, intergovernmental bodies, international bodies, the Africa Union are secondary. In fact, the Africa Union would be among the worst places to go, because the decision makers there, the ultimate decision makers, are African presidents. So the AU is not going to help us to come from in country. And it stems, I pick up from the gentleman from Zambia, I think his name is Joseph, who talked about how they mobilized. It is a risk. For us to win this war, we have to be prepared to take risks. Our people have to be prepared to get involved in politics, and it is risky. Our people have to come out, especially middle class professionals, stop watching from a safe distance and complaining from a safe distance. They have to plunge themselves in. And I'm not suggesting that everybody be a candidate, but I'm saying that they participate, they sponsor candidates, they put their money in there, they help to mobilize, they put their vehicles, they put their airtime, they get involved in large numbers. That is the only way, in my humble opinion, that's maybe not the only way, sorry, but the most primary way to solve this problem of election stealing, because it is a political problem. Primarily, it needs to be defeated or resolved politically. And the more people are involved in a process, the more people are prepared to take risks and get involved in a process, the less the opportunities for manipulation. I watch our countries, I watch Uganda here, what Bobby Wine has to go through, but even most important, what Colonel Besigye has to go through. But you have thousands, hundreds of thousands, I think millions of Ugandans who could demonstrate solidarity, who could take the risk. I give credit to many Kenyans who have done that. We haven't done enough yet, but people coming out onto the streets to take the risk. It is risky. People lose lives. But you know what? It's a matter of life and death. People must be willing to come and participate in elections, not to leave to see elections and politics as a dirty thing to be left to those dirty politicians. That is what those dirty politicians want. They want to scare you so much so that you keep away, so that they keep rigging and stealing these elections. You must scare them by coming out to participate in demonstrations, in marches, in voting, in campaigns, and so on, so that it becomes very difficult for even, and they do kill people, and they will kill people, and that's extremely unfortunate, but they must find that the more they kill, the more people come out to participate. That, for me, has been the sure bet for pushing back these people who manipulate political processes and corrupt them, so that they can use them to remain perched at that position of privilege at the top. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simeha, and that is a really good call for the people. And this is where I would like to actually go back to Nana, because you did talk about how rigging may be halted, but what is the role of the citizens in this? Nana? Nana, are you there? Can you unmute your mic? Okay, I think she's having some difficulty. So I'm just going to move on to Joseph to get your thoughts. You did give the example of Zambia, and it has been very inspiring about the fact that you mobilized through social media. And you did talk a little bit about how, due to your mobilization, you were able to get people out. I think one of the biggest question we have is, how did the Zambians become inspired enough to go out, defend their votes, make sure that the winner is announced? What do you think was the trigger? What was the X factor that led to that? And do you think that is enough to stop election rigging in Africa? Joseph. Joseph, you need to unmute your mic. You were telling me previously that you were having difficulty with your mic. Can you try to unmute it? Okay, I'll move on to Tundu Lissu then. Lissu, Tanzania has a very exceptional history in terms of, it is among the very few, I'm not sure if it's the only, but it's among the very few, I can say bravely, African countries where the independence era party is still in power since the 60s. Although it has rebranded itself to another name of CCM, but it's basically the same minority that has been running the country for over 60 years. What do you think needs to be done, one, to stem in Tanzania, but also in Africa, to be able to stem out election rigging?
I think, in my view, the election rigging anywhere, not just in Africa, but election rigging anywhere, is a symptom of a fact that the democratic struggles have not succeeded in building strong democratic institutions. It is a symptom of the fact that the business of building a democracy is unfinished. If I use the example of Tanzania, and I think this probably rings true of Uganda and other countries in our neighborhood. If you look at the evolution of our electoral systems since the reintroduction of multi-party system in the early 1990s, one thing comes out very sharply, that the presidential control of the electoral system, which was a hallmark of the one-party era, has remained largely intact. It is the case certainly in Tanzania, where the president has always appointed the electoral commission and its chief executive officer. It is also the fact, I think the lady from Uganda has testified to. It is also a fact in Uganda. Kenya, in East Africa, Kenya, after long years of struggle, has moved away from that imperial control of the electoral process, which was the hallmark of the Moi and Kenyatta one eras, if I'm correct. But in Tanzania, we did not succeed in democratizing the state and democratizing the electoral process. The electoral process remains in the hands of one of the partisans in the general elections. The president, who, as I said earlier, is also the leader of the party. That has to change. We have to finish the business of democratizing our electoral system. We have to make sure that the electoral management bodies, our electoral commissions, are independent of the political control of those who are interested in the outcome of elections, i.e. the incumbent presidents or their governments. We have to make sure that we create electoral commissions which are independent, which are truly independent in the manner in which they are appointed, independent in the manner in which they are funded, independent in the manner in which they run elections. And here I'll tell you, in Tanzania, for instance, the election basically is run by local government functionaries, and all these are answerable to ultimately to the minister and the president, and therefore and this has been recognized by observers. Our election observers of our elections have consistently stated that one of the major problems of our electoral system is the fact that the electoral machinery is heavily controlled by the ruling party. That has to change. We have to change our electoral laws. In Tanzania today, our main elections act, the National Elections Act, was enacted at the heyday of one-party rule. It's a 1985 legislation. the hate of one-party system. It is a legislation which was designed primarily for single-party elections. If you look at similar election legislation in other countries, in countries which have moved on democratically, in Kenya, which is close to us, the Kenya's electoral laws have changed remarkably since 2002, when the KANU government was ousted from power in an election. So the legislation is much more democratic in Kenya than it is in Tanzania. You have to look at processes of the control of the security forces during elections. As 2020 proved beyond doubt, the security forces, the control of the security forces makes the incumbent government, gives the incumbent government the kind of institutional support of these instruments of violence, which it then uses to rig elections, to rig itself into power by intimidating opponents, by using violence and repression against the opposition and so on. So the issue of the control of the security forces is very important. And this has to be addressed as part of the larger question of democratization of the state. The control of the media. In 2020, this is one area which I think we have not spoken much enough. Much enough. In 2020, literally all the television and radio networks in Tanzania, they all set aside massive amounts of airtime, live airtime, to cover Magufuli and CCM's election rallies. It was largely Magufuli. So daily, Magufuli was live on television. Now we know that actually even private television stations were intimidated and coerced into giving free airtime to the CCM presidential candidate. You may remember, Maria, that one of the owners of the major TV networks in Tanzania has recently stated that they were basically told to cover CCM presidential campaigns and were not even paid.
Yes, it's true.
As far as the government-owned media, the publicly owned media is concerned, the Tanzanian Broadcasting Corporation, TBC, its television networks and radio, and the government-owned newspapers, Daily News and Habari Leo, they would, in fact, no one would make would see the difference. No one will notice the difference if they presented themselves as mass media owned by CCM, because during elections, I mean, during normal time it's bad enough, but during the elections, 2020 was obviously the worst in that regard. But you had end-to-end coverage of CCM campaigns, end-to-end, and complete blackout of the opposition candidates. One television station, I don't know, I don't remember whether it is Star TV or ITV, was heavily fined for running an interview that I had with the Voice of America TV. So there was complete blackout of my campaign and end-to-end coverage of CCM campaigns. And this raises the issue of the fairness in electoral reporting, both by private as well as by the publicly owned media. These are issues which have to be addressed. The private media has a responsibility to provide fair reporting of the electoral process. It is not just making money using public airwaves. They have a responsibility, because they use public airwaves, they have a responsibility to help the country get the kind of leadership which the nation deserves. And therefore, the issue of media during elections, both private and public, is very important. And so my conclusion is that I believe, if you ask me, the picture that emerges is very bleak. There is no doubt. But I am one person who remains completely hopeful about our future prospects, because I believe the people of Tanzania and the people of Africa will not tolerate election rigging forever. There is a time, time will come, hopefully soon, when the people will say, we have had enough of this racket, and they will take appropriate measures. So I remain completely hopeful that the democratic battles that lie ahead of us are actually winnable if we do, we struggle more courageously, more creatively, more smartly. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Tundu Lissu. That was really something in terms of telling us in details the kind of election rigging methods that occur not only in Tanzania, but also on the continent, and giving us some more insight about how this can be one way or another stamped. The responsibility lies with a number of players. It is not only for the politicians or for those in power who are holding on to power, but there is a responsibility from the media, as Tundu Lissu has mentioned, and also from the citizens. Nana, I see that you're back, and I just really wanted to get your view about how do we end it? Will it ever end? I mean, you did say that it will never end, but can you give us a little bit of hope, Nana? Nana, can you unmute your mic? I think the problem is that you're muted. Okay, I'll be moving on to Joseph. Joseph, I'm still trying to see, are you there? Are you able to switch on your mic now? Joseph, are you able to unmute your mic?
Yes, Mary, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Joseph. So I really wanted to have a message of hope from you. When we asked, will it ever end? And just if you can give us something that we can hold on to as hope that eventually we can end election rigging in Africa. Something, if you can even say, if Zambia can do it, Africa can do it. Whatever it is, but give us some hope.
Well, everything that goes up will eventually come down. Nothing stays on top forever. I was listening to the lady from Uganda. She was saying the African Union must come in and help play a role in terms of election rigging. Look, the African political landscape has been very clear for so many years. The African Union has been in existence for decades of years. For decades, for the past, I think, since 1963. What has the African Union done? We must have honest conversations as Africans. What has it done to ensure that the electoral processes are very clear and elections are done in the favor of the masses of our people? There has been very little face in the African Union. Look, in Malawi, there was an election in 2019. That election was held and the African Union did send observers there. SADC did send observers there. And after the election was done, it was declared that President Peter Mutharika had won the election. And, the election observers, including the African Union, declared that the election was free and fair. So how do we then, as Africans, begin to have faith in an organization that has a very large historical background of not standing for the masses of our people? So the moment that we fail to have these honest conversations is the start of us setting ourselves up for failure. We need to start as countries to begin to ensure that we fight for democratic reforms, we fight for electoral reforms. In Zambia, some people say the Electoral Commission of Zambia is fair, but individually, and this is the stance that is shared by so many people, including those in my party, that the Electoral Commission of Zambia has not been unfair over the past years. We cannot say it's fair just because it gave us a victory as an opposition, just because it was pushed onto the corner to declare the opposition as winners. But then I also believe that that was a right step going forward. It's a right step in our political process. And I do believe that if Zambia can be able to do that, so can other countries, so can Uganda, so can Tanzania, where Chadema and CCM can be able to have fair and free elections, where the opposition from Chadema can meet their members without being brutalized, without being stopped, like Honorable Tundu Lissu was saying, without being stopped from meeting the masses of their people. I believe even in Kenya that can happen. But we must fight for those electoral reforms as individual countries, as citizens of those countries. And I believe young people must also play a very critical role. Because if you look at the way our political landscape is in Africa, a lot of young people do not have interest in politics. And I don't fault them for that, because they have seen politicians come into the political space, and instead of solving their problem, they begin to exchange insults on social media. They begin to exchange insults in newspapers and on different platforms. So then young people lose interest because they don't see the change that politics brings in their lives. The economies are still falling apart. They don't have jobs. So we need to ensure that young people are motivated to enter into the political landscape, that they fight for electoral reforms, that they don't see the need to give up. Because the moment that we give up, the moment that we feel even if I go to vote, there will be no change, then it means we'll continue to have the very same process over and over and over again. But I do believe what happened in Zambia and what happened even in Malawi and in other countries, that was the bridge upon which we could be able to move forward as a continent. That even people in Nigeria, where there will be elections in 2023, even people in Zimbabwe, where there will be elections in 2023, and even in Angola, because we shouldn't just be interested about the political landscapes of our countries. We must be able to understand how politics operates in Tanzania, for instance. There was a gentleman that was protesting in parliament in Tanzania, I think 2 days ago, where he was doing backsummers in parliament to protest that he needed roads in his constituency. But we shouldn't have a politics where people have to go to parliament to go and protest that just because you belong to the opposition, the government must not avail funds for you to develop your constituency. It shouldn't be like that. But our politics has become so politically toxic to such an extent that we don't even have time to listen to the ideas and the views of opposition members. So if somebody from the opposition offers an opinion, we look at it as an enemy. We don't want to listen and give an opinion even to those that are our enemies. That is a problem that we have within the African continent. But going forward, I do believe very strongly, and I have faith in this belief, that we can change the political landscape of our continent. And that change needs to be done through the democratic processes, through electoral reforms. And young people must play a very important role in that. They mustn't be discouraged from getting involved in the political process. We must continue to fight. Even us, now that the UPND is in government, we are ensuring that the democracy that we were not availed when we were in the opposition can be availed to now opposition members, that people could gather and meet the masses of their people, meet their supporters without being blocked, without the Zambian police battalion going to block them. The opposition members must be able to meet. And the only differences that we must have should be ideological. That is a political space that we must occupy. And that we all just look for a better country. And we have different ideas to get to that future. That is the only difference that we must have, whether you're from the ruling party or from the opposition. But that political space does not exist in Africa. Every time opposition members are looked as enemies. We were in the opposition for 23 years. I'm almost going into my 30s now. But it does not mean that because I'm young, I shouldn't get involved in politics. This is our country. We did not apply to be born in Africa. Therefore, we must be able to fight for a better Africa, an Africa that is free, stable, and able to stand on its own 2 feet, economically, politically, and socially. We must fight for that. And I think the fight must begin by also getting young people involved in politics, them being interested and availing resources for them. Because it's very difficult to participate in politics as young people, because you need to have money, you need to be rich, you need to have finances. So young people do not get involved in those things because they don't have the resources. So I do believe going forward, and like I said, I have a very strong faith and belief in the notion that we can be able to change our continent for the better. These dictators, at some stage, they'll go. Even when people come and fight with us, nothing is permanent. One way or another, we can be able to shape the direction of our African continent from Cape to Cairo and all other places in between. Even when dictators are paying members, certain members to fight those that are advocating for democracy, we can defeat these people. We can defeat them. We can dust ourselves off and begin to shape the direction of the African continent. And going forward, I do live with that belief. And I think everyone else in here, whether you are from Kenya or Uganda, or you are from Zambia like myself, or you are from Zimbabwe, or you are from South Africa, we can provide that direction of an Africa that we need, an Africa that is stable, an Africa that can accommodate the dreams of everyone else that lives in our continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Such an inspiration, really. And I really, really do agree with you that we need more and more young people joining politics in one way or another, or becoming active in one way or another in politics in order to change the direction. Nana, are you able to switch on your mic now? I'll give it one more try. If you try to switch on your mic, I think you're still having some difficulty. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who has been tonight in this space. And I want to thank a lot Leah Ngari, who is unfortunately facing some technical difficulties and is not able to join us up here, but she's still in the space and she can hear us. I would really like to show the utmost appreciation to our main speakers who took off time tonight and join us in Mwanzo Spaces, including Tundu Lissu, who is a presidential candidate in 2020 election in Tanzania. He's also the vice chair of the main opposition party in Tanzania, Chadema. We also have Joseph Kalimbwe, who's been part of
Hello,
the
Maria?
Zambian opposition. Yes, Nana, you're
Nana,
back.
can I?
Yes, please, just some message before I completely close the space. Yes, please. Nana, go ahead. Nana, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Maria, I can hear
Can you hear us?
Your line is breaking a lot, but I am able to give my conclusion.
Okay. If you can hear us, Nana, I would suggest that you go ahead and we will try to also text you at the back channel. Nana, can you hear us? Okay, unfortunately, I think Nana is still having some technical difficulties. Unfortunately, we do have to finish up the space. So I would really like to thank you, Nana, as well for taking part. And I do know that Uganda is facing a lot of technical difficulties at this moment in time with severe restrictions on a number of platforms. I would also like to thank Dismas Mokua and Joseph Simeka, who have been also part of this discussion as analysts, Isaac Mwaura, who also had some technical difficulties, but we're able to have him as part of our space. And I would like to remind everyone that Mwanzo Spaces happens every Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m., discussing various issues that are about Africa and East Africa in general. And we welcome any suggestion topics as well as any suggested speakers for our Mwanzo Spaces. Nana, do you hear us?
Maria?
Can you hear me,
Yes,
Nana?
Maria, I'm able to give. Yes, I could give my closing one on saying
Yes,
that, yes, there is hope. There is hope that elections can, at one point in our African continent, means to the, hello?
Yes, go on. I can
Yes,
hear you,
Maria.
Nana. Go on.
Hello, Maria.
Yes, I think you really have a very bad line. As I said, in Uganda, you must be facing a lot of
Okay, if you're
difficulties.
able to hear me, I would like to conclude by saying that, yes, there is hope. Yes, at one point, at some point in our journey on the continent, we shall get to a point where elections mean something. Even if it means, I would like to encourage fellow Ugandans. One example of a country where elections currently have meant nothing. Elections have only served to divide the country deeply, to divide the people along tribal lines. Elections have just served to deeply entrench Museveni's dictatorship. But I would like to call on Ugandans and give them hope that with continued resistance, everything comes to an end. The dictatorship shall fall someday. Civil society shall regain their power for people to be educated and encouraged, and awareness built for the people to continue resisting until that dictatorship falls. To the rest of our African brothers, especially in the region, there used to be a song. Growing up, there used to be a song I had, I don't know, so many lines of it, but it used to go, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Mozambique, tusaidiane. There has to be some meaningful thing from this African Union, the unity, this and that. It has to leave paper and go into action. If Kenyans have a neighboring dictatorship, a dictatorship where social media is shut down at will, where a dictator's son has a public birthday party running a whole month and blocking people's roads, public roads, Kenya does not benefit, Tanzania does not benefit, Congo will not benefit, Rwanda will not grow from neighboring a harsh dictatorship. So I want to sing that song. Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Mozambique, Sudan, the region, Africa, all neighbors, Zambia, tusaidiane. Let's have one language when it comes to speaking the language of stepping on this repression, resisting against this repression, and having a time when the next generations can enjoy their right to choose the leaders that can take them forward. Thank you very much. And I hope that we continue to create these informal spaces. We create ad hoc groups amongst ourselves as Africans to continue resisting together until we realize a continent where people live in peace and dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nana. This was very inspiring, and I'm so happy that you were able to connect before we ended the space, because your message is so strong. It resonates. It talks about solidarity for Africans in order to end some of these really very detrimental practices that we see, including election rigging, which is really a headache, as we have discussed in this space today. So I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank all the speakers and to ask everyone to follow Mwanzo TV on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Until next week, please make sure that you enjoy your week and keep the conversation going around Africa, around East Africa. Have a good night, and bye-bye.